All right, we are missing a couple. Hopefully they'll be able to join us shortly, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the rebranded ARC Hangouts, now named ARC Networking, where you guys will be allowed to kind of get to hear from industry professionals talk about topics. So for our first one this semester, we kind of wanted to shoot broad just to kind of engage with this programming. So the topic is what I wish I would have known before graduating. And we are joined by some amazing professionals. I will go ahead and let, I'll go in the order, I'll introduce them in the order that I have them in my notes here. Zach, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, my name is Zach Sumada, work for BRR Architecture out of Kansas City as the Director of Design, graduated in 2011 from the University of Kansas and have been employed by BRR since then.
Awesome. The next one on my list is Joshua.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Bender. Graduated from KU in 2009 and been with M+H Architects pretty much since. I'm project architect over there.
Awesome. And then our final one is Elaine, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Elaine Gallagher Adams. I am, let's see, I graduated from KU in 1994, so I'm old. But I am the Sustainability Director at LS3P Architects. It's the largest architecture firm in the Southeast. And I also teach at Savannah College of Art and Design.
Awesome. We will go ahead and jump right into our first question, and we'll go in reverse order of what I just went in. And it's a pretty broad one, but what is the transition like from being a student to being a full-time working professional? And you don't have to go into all of the nuances. If you have one specific example that comes to mind, we'd love to hear it. And we'll start with Elaine.
Oh, that was a long time ago. I think the best thing about moving into the profession was there are a couple of things. One is getting a regular schedule, which is great. Two is getting paid, which is even better. But really, you are still learning the whole time. The whole time you're in school, you're learning, and then you are in learning mode for the first 10 years of practice. You don't turn it off. In fact, we never turn it off, but you're still really soaking up everything you can for the first 7 to 10 years of practice.
Awesome. Josh, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest transition for a lot of people is kind of going from school where you do some group projects, but in college, group projects are probably even more difficult than the real world because of everyone's schedule. But working with a team and working collaboratively on a single project, I think is a big transition from school.
Yeah, awesome. Then we'll jump to Zach for our final input on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just piggyback off of what Elaine said a little bit. The transition to being a professional, getting paid for all your hard work is definitely the biggest one. And then learning to adjust to a routine, a schedule, whereas with school, it's a little bit more fluid. That was the biggest transition for me personally, was just getting into a routine, understanding the 9 to 5, understanding all the intricacies of the professional world, and just trying to learn as much as possible in that time frame.
Awesome. All right, we'll move on to the next question. It'll get a little bit more detail requesting with this one is, what is one of the biggest difference between studio culture in school versus in the workforce? And we'll start with Josh for this one.
Sure. I think a lot of it depends at the place that you're at. I would say personally at where I work, I would say kind of the egos are a little bit different than in school. in school, everyone's kind of working on their own thing and a lot of times kind of competing on, who can do the best project, who can, get the highest grade. While in work, it's more of a collaborative environment. So it's everyone's truly on the same page. Everyone's truly trying to help each other, share their knowledge. So I think it's a lot of times friendlier environment and also more helpful for building knowledge.
Yeah, awesome. We'll jump over to Zach to follow up with that.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference, at least for me, was the time frame to make decisions and to get to answers. I think that in studio you have a little bit more freedom and to explore, and I think in the real world all that gets condensed. So the ability to make decisions quick, knowing that it's not going to be the exact right answer possibly, but knowing what's good enough in places and knowing how to make and get to an answer quickly is probably the biggest difference.
Yeah, awesome. And then wrapping us up for this question, Elaine, have any additional comments? Love to hear them.
The biggest difference I see, and now I am both in the studio environment and in a professional environment, is that in a studio environment, you work really hard to create equality. Everybody gets the same voice. There's a lot of, soothing of egos and what have you to make sure that all the students are having the same kind of experience and the same input. In practice, there is a hierarchy, and there is a project manager. You answer to the project manager. There is a project architect who will probably make the final design decisions on the project. You can weigh in, and you should always weigh in, because if you're hired, they want you to speak. But understand that you can't go sulk if they don't take your ideas. And that's the biggest difference in school. My students come to me and say, so-and-so is not taking my ideas. And I have to have a little meeting with the 4 people in the group and make sure that everybody's ideas are being taken into account. I see people smiling, so you probably know what I'm talking about. In practice, tough. If your ideas aren't viable, they're not going to be used. If you really have a problem, a personality problem, you take it to HR, and you may or may not get some kind of conclusion from that. But there is a hierarchy, and it's usually a well-earned one. And there's a lot to be learned both ways.
Yeah, awesome. Great pieces of advice. Definitely something we can start preparing ourselves in. So the next questions and the next series of questions kind of go into a little bit more skills-based inquiries. But the first one is very topical with all of us transitioning to Zoom, is how frequently do you find yourself having to learn new programs? And we will go ahead and start with Zach for this one.
I think that the second you stop learning in the professional world, you've started to handicap yourself. So I think that whether the programs change overnight, seems rare, but being adaptable and being willing to learn and being on the cutting edge of what's going on and being aware of it is vital. We're constantly as a company looking at new ways to integrate technology across the board, whether it's virtual reality or now this work from home and hybrid system that we're in. But I think it's constantly being on your toes and willing to learn new programs more than anything.
Awesome. Elaine, do you have any other inputs on this topic?
Lots of input. I'm very technological, so I always feel like I want to learn the latest and greatest stuff. And I am constant. I probably learn some new piece of software every year, at least one program pretty well every year. But I got to tell you, right now they're coming at me left and right, and I'm to the point now where I have to choose my camp. You kind of pick and choose what you want to dive into, and you can't do it all. Being a sustainability director, I'm being people are trying to sell me carbon calculators, energy modeling software, all this stuff. And each one is different. And each one takes a lot of time to learn. So I've chosen the ones I want to learn, and some I have flat out decided I'm not going to put my energy there. I am also being pulled into geospatial design, which excites me a lot. So if you do choose a certain software, make sure that it's something that excites you. I think the future of geospatial design using GIS in conjunction with architecture is the future of our industry, without a doubt. And that would be my advice to you guys. If you haven't already played with ArcGIS, City Engine, you got to jump into it if you have access to it at school. I really see it coming into full use across the board, probably within the next 10 years. Then there's all the office stuff. You got Bluebeam, you got, oh God, they just pulled another one out for work, and then your HR software, and your HR software is something else, and you have no choice. You have to use those. So you are constantly learning new software. And if you are not comfortable in the computer world, maybe rethink your career path, because architecture is on computers.
Yeah, awesome. I want to remind everyone, we do actually have access to ArcGIS as students of KU, so that is something you can look into. But to round off this question, Josh, if you have any comments.
Yeah, so I'm also the BIM manager at MNH, so I focus a lot on technology and introducing new programs and workflows and how to train everyone on new software. So I think one of the biggest things that coming into a firm initially that you can offer is, the new ideas of someone outside of the office. So programs you use in school that maybe the office isn't utilizing. And also, I think the younger generations are more technology literate. So helping, older colleagues learn new programs, I think, is a big asset that you can provide. But it's all about kind of gauging, the firm you're at and introducing all of that in a way that's most beneficial to actually getting pushed through.
We're getting ready to start a reverse mentoring program where our young people are going to start tutoring our older people. And we're very excited about that.
I may steal that idea, so thank you.
It's going to be like that. Is it Allstate ad where they say, no, you don't have to sign your name after every text.
Yep.
Well, on that note, I have a follow-up question. When you are starting to learn new programming, what methodologies have you found that just help you kind of think through the programs and get them down pat? And I will jump over to Josh first from this one, see what he has to say.
Yeah, well, usually in our office, when we're introducing something new, there's at least 1 or 2 or 3 people that have some experience with the software. That's normally how it gets introduced. So those, couple of people then become the champions of it, and also the people that kind of have to push out training for it. So it really kind of is a collaborative effort on our end. We're right now at 33 people who work every day in architecture and architecture programs. So we kind of approach it as a kind of all hands on deck, collaborative environment. When you find out something new in a program, kind of share it with the group. We'll do kind of, weekly or monthly training sessions for different programs. So it's really kind of we expect everyone in the office to kind of seek out ways to train themselves and what works best for them, but also to be hungry for learning new information, new ways to use programs effectively.
Yeah, awesome. It seems like our generation is primed to be the forerunners of that. But if Zach, you want to follow up with any insight you have on learning new technology?
Yeah, for me, so similar to Josh, I handle a lot of the early schematic work at the company and manage a lot of our 3D modeling programs with SketchUp and Inkscape. And my biggest advice to people when they first get into a program is YouTube. Quite honestly, everything exists out there. I can't personally train every single person, and there's a lot of tools out there, and it requires you a little bit being a self-starter to go out there and kind of search those things out. But you can go through the programs. There's step-by-steps. There's YouTubers out there that have created whole playlists on how to do pretty much anything that you could want to learn. And it allows you to follow along and pause and do it at your own pace, which I personally have found incredibly beneficial, and you learn a lot more that way.
Yeah. Awesome. And then to round off this question, Elaine, any insight on learning new programs?
Yeah, they say there are 3 types of learners: listeners, doers, and what's the third one? Seers, something like that. For me, I hate anything I don't understand, which I know is a personality flaw, but I have to watch the tutorial, I have to read the book, and then I have to immerse myself in it. And truly, if we have a new software program and I can't use it right away, I'm not gonna learn it until I have something to work on, because I don't have the time to learn something and then let it sit fallow back here until I need it. So I tend to learn software as it comes up in use.
Right, awesome. Continuing on with the kind of skills thought process and going a little bit back to school, are there any classes you wish you would have taken or maybe not taken in hindsight since you have left school? And we'll snake back around and start with Elaine this time.
Oh gosh, yeah. I took some weird ones that I loved, and I'm so glad I took. But I also wish I had taken other ones. So I'll start with the ones I wish I had taken, and that is graphic design. Graphic design, all the Photoshop and InDesign. We use InDesign so much for our boards, and I am useless. I rely way too much on our graphic designers. And I hate that I can't even go in and edit what they've done because I can't figure out how they group stuff together. So that's a big one. Learn InDesign and graphic design. Don't assume that because you're an architect, you understand graphic design. There are rules, there are design tools to use that are really effective and that make better graphics. So whether you are presenting to a client, pursuing an award, doing marketing for your firm, we need graphic skills, and I hate that I don't do it well. Interior design would have helped me a lot. Unfortunately, being an early female to this profession, even in the 90s, there weren't many of us. I was often tasked with interior design just because I was female, and actually I suck at it. It's really bad. I'm an architect, I'm not an interior designer, and I wish I'd had some training in interior design. So that's that in business. We always say that if I had just had a basic business class, I had one tutorial on how to do a pro forma. Thank God, because I've used that information my whole career. So if you don't know what a pro forma is, look it up, ask somebody how to make one, what goes into it. It's important for us to know how to think like developers. Our clients are developers. If I can't get inside their head and understand what their challenges are, I'm not going to relate. I'm not going to get the job, for starters. But we are often tasked with weighing in on the financials of the project, and I have to understand that. So on the side of the classes that I took that were odd, and I'm so glad I took, I actually got one degree before going to KU, and it was in historic preservation here at Savannah College of Art and Design. I ended up taking as an elective fiber arts, and I have used that throughout my entire career. So understanding different weaves, understanding the physics of fiber when it's in tension and compression, now knowing how to work with tensile structures and knowing what I can do, applying the patterns that you create in fiber to masonry, I've done that quite a bit. That turned into a class that people tease me about because I learned basket making at college level. I have used so much. Color theory as well. Color theory was another one that I was really glad I took.
Awesome. That is great to hear. Zach, any comments you want to follow up with that? Any classes that you wish you would have taken?
Yeah, not to piggyback off Elaine on this one, but again, I agree. Anything to do with the Adobe suite and understanding graphics is hugely beneficial. I didn't realize how important it was. And when you talk about board layouts, when you talk about presentation drawings, there's something that's aesthetically pleasing about the way that things are laid out and understanding that. But also the background in the Adobe suite is hugely beneficial. I would also say to find classes that are passion projects. It's okay to venture outside of the architecture world and the arts world from time to time and find something that inspires you and encourages you to go out there and want to learn more, because it's something that you have to do in order to stay passionate and relevant in this profession.
Yeah. To finish off this question, Josh, if you have anything you want to add, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think Elaine and Zach nailed a lot of things on the head. What I'd like to add, definitely echo the sentiment of any programs that are kind of relevant in the field. Getting training on that before you get into the field is always beneficial. When you're cranking on trying to get a project out, the last thing you want to be doing is learning how to actually use a program. But also I would encourage, passion projects, yes, but also any classes that are somewhat related to architecture, but not really requirements. So like, I know like an acoustical class would be great. That's information that a lot of people in the field don't have expertise with. So if you can come in with kind of some knowledge that's a little bit different than peers or people you think in the field have, that's always an asset.
So, man, that would make Jason Pittman proud. I know it. But moving on to our next question. What is one soft skill you wish you would have developed further before leaving school? And for this one, we'll start with Zach.
Soft skill, public speaking is a big one. I see so many students come out of school that just freeze up. I see so many veterans in the profession that freeze up, understanding how to present in front of a large group, understanding everybody's in the same boat when it comes to that, and know that behind every good public speaker is someone that's nervous as all get out. So everybody shares that, and learning to conquer that early and being able to command a room and talk passionately about your project and sell your work is huge.
Yeah. We'll jump over to Elaine. Any additional comments you want to add for this, soft skills?
Yeah, somewhat related to what Zach just said is storytelling. And I know it has come into the university realm a lot more in the last 10 years, especially business schools are offering storytelling. Look for it in your own business school. Law schools are also offering storytelling because it's so much of what we do. And storytelling in the realm of marketing, I tell my own students, if you can't sell your own work, you will not get built. And we have to tell the story. It's not about what we've just designed. It's about why we designed it, and what it feels like to experience it. And if it's not in a narrative, if it's not a story, it's very hard to sell.
Yeah, and then to finish off this question, we'll jump over to Josh.
Yeah, I would think a big thing and something that's really different in school in some ways is time management. In school, you're kind of on your own schedule a little bit more. You're juggling between getting work done for different classes. while in the real world, you're all on a client's deadline or your company's deadline. So keeping everything in front of you and organized and managing your task is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, time management, definitely one that we're going to have to really develop after COVID. But moving on to our next question, looking a little bit less at getting ready to graduate and more towards starting out your college experience. As underclassmen, what would you recommend students kind of focus on with building skills? I know we touched on this a little bit, but specifically more targeted towards underclassmen. And we'll start with Josh this time.
I know KU's doing a better job of offering design build opportunities for the underclassmen, but anything related to design build, I think, is extremely helpful. And even the next step forward, and this is what I always tell people, especially first, second, third year students, when they're starting to go out and look for internships, it's really hard when you're that young to get in a firm, because firms are looking for people that are normally fourth year. That's the sweet spot on getting someone in, trying them out for summer, then bringing them on full time. So if you can't get something like that for the summer, working at a construction company, there's no better experience than that, because actually knowing how things go together and how construction actually happens is something that's extremely beneficial to designing and doing detailing of how construction goes together.
And casual plug for Habitat for Humanity. If you can't find a construction firm to work for, they are always working for volunteers. But
no matter where you live.
Yeah, exactly. With that, I'll actually jump over to Elaine if you want to talk about underclassmen development and skills.
All right, I'll make a plug for my own passion, which is sustainability. If you have access to a class in sustainable design, take it. And then follow that up immediately with LEED GA accreditation, which is the general accreditation. It does put your resume on the top of the pile. I know at most firms, we're trying to raise the percentage of design staff who are LEED accredited in one way or another, either GA or AP. And if you come into the firm as a GA, that's valuable. Then you get immediate hopefully you get immediate experience working on LEED projects if you're in an active firm for sustainable design. I know in our firm, managing documentation for LEED is not rocket science. I give that to a lot of our junior designers looking for experience in LEED so they can go on and get their AP. And it's a better use of project money and time for me to use junior designers to do that. But if you don't have familiarity with LEED, you're not going to get those opportunities. So I know I teach sustainable design at SCAD, and all of my students come out of that class with a LEED GA. And there's nothing saying you can't do that on your own, self-directed, but it's worth it. Even if projects aren't necessarily using LEED, you still need that vocabulary because we're doing it anyway.
Yeah, awesome. I will jump over to Zach for our final point on this topic. I'm loving the conversation.
Yeah, I'll second what Josh said. One of the things that got me into my company was working construction in the summers. Hugely beneficial, understanding the process, understanding the work ethic that goes into it, understanding the difficulties that sometimes architects can cause for the construction side of things. And knowing those things, as well as, and it definitely sets you apart from other students. The other thing I would encourage you to do that I see less and less of in my reviews with students is more hand drawing, just understanding how to quickly communicate an idea. Sometimes you don't have time to go back to the computer. Sometimes you just need to quickly be able to ideate in front of a client and make a decision quickly. And what I would tell you, and that's a daunting thing to think about of, well, I'm not the best hand sketcher or I'm better at the computer. Find an architect or a designer or an industrial designer or somebody that you like their style and just focus on mimicking it. and build upon it. Your style will develop and your hand will develop over time, but being able to quickly in a sketchbook or over a piece of trace sketch something out that can convey an idea is hugely helpful in your career.
Awesome. The next question, now that that one's, I feel, pretty well answered, is did you have any habits from school that carried over into your work life in a positive or negative way? And we will start with Zach on this one.
Habits that carried over, being able to work under the stresses of very little sleep. I don't think, in studio, there's a lot of all-nighters, but being able to multitask, managing different classes, different schedules, different testing parameters, all those different things, being able to multitask is hugely beneficial. It's rare that you're working on just one particular project. You're often managing multiple projects in multiple phases of design and construction, and being able to stay organized is incredibly helpful. And I wasn't the most organized in school.
Awesome. We'll jump over to Josh for the next one for answering.
Yeah, well, I don't really have much more to add to Zach's point. I think multitasking is probably the biggest thing for me too that kind of came over. It's just the difference of, multitasking between different classes you're taking and changing that over to multitasking between different projects.
Yeah, awesome. Get that multitasking skills down, guys. That's what I'm hearing. Elaine, do you want to finish off this question?
Yeah, it relates a little bit to Zach's earlier comments, but because I took so much art in school with the 3 degrees I got, that I carried the artwork, my ability to sketch, and my eye for sketching well throughout my career, and I continue to. It saved me so many times being able to sketch on the fly. But also that sense of, your summer abroad somewhere, keep doing that as much as you possibly can. Even if you're only going somewhere for a few days, treat every trip as if it's a study abroad, and bring your sketchbook and really keep honing those skills. Bring them with you. Don't leave them behind at all. It's so easy to stop drawing when you start a family and life gets really difficult. And you go on vacation, you got kids following you, and you're worried about who got the luggage in the back of the car and what have you. But don't lose that creative side of you. That's my biggest struggle and both joy.
Awesome. All right, and I just noticed, sorry, Greg, I don't know how long you've been here.
Not long. Sincere apologies. I got tied up and was unable to get on promptly. So I've joined in. I didn't hear the question, but I think I've heard most of the answers. So
yeah, no worries. If you do want to answer it, we'd love to hear it. The question, you can also introduce yourself. But did you have any habits from school that carried over into your work life in a positive or negative way? And feel free to introduce yourself too.
Yeah, I'll do that again. Greg Sheldon. I'm with BNIM Architects in Kansas City, Missouri, a principal there. Graduated from the University of Kansas many moons ago. Well, gosh, that was back when you had to get 2 degrees. You had to get a Bachelor of Environmental Design, and then if they allowed you, you would go on and get the Bachelor of Architecture, the accredited course, which I got in 1978. And back then, what carried over, good or bad? It's been long enough, it's hard to remember all the habits. It's still been hard. Somehow I never completely have, I've gotten much better, but I had a tendency maybe to procrastinate a tiny bit when I was in school and studio, things like that. God, you got to get over that. Let me tell you, at some point you have to get past that. our firm currently teaches a 4th-year comprehensive design studio for, I hate to say it, K-State University. But when we teach that class, one of the major things with a comprehensive studio is it's not the one where you screw around for the most of the project and then the night before you do it and you're done. That doesn't work when you get to that studio, that 4th-year studio, and it does not work in the real world, not even vaguely. And that was something I had to create the discipline and rigor to actually be able to keep a project going. One of the I'll just use this because I always like to use the example. One of the wonderful things opportunities I had at BNIM, I've been able to work on some really significant projects, and I was a senior project architect for the block building expansion at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art with Stephen's office. And we had the period of that project, which you would call construction, construction documents. We had exactly a year, almost to the month. Every day of that year, I'll never get over it. Every day of that year felt like the night before a project was due in studio. Every day. We didn't, with all that time and as hard as we worked and as large our team, and we still got about half done what we needed to. It's just that it gets that intense and that difficult. So if you have that tendency to not organize your tasks, not organize yourself, not to go at your work and your projects with a disciplined professional manner, boy, you're in trouble. So that's a learning curve that I went through. It was bad. I think it finally got good. On the good side, I was always inherently, utterly curious and fascinated about everything, design-wise. I remember when I was in studio, I never worked on my projects. I wandered around through Marvin Hall to see what other people were doing. I wanted to see what the other projects were. I wanted to see who's doing what studio's doing what project. Hey, what are you working on right now? I spent more time doing that than I did my own work, as I just said. But that maintaining that kind of eternal curiosity is I think is critical. If you lose that fascination and that interest, you'll just go dead in the water. So how about that? There's a couple things.
Great comments. I also would highly recommend checking out other people's studio work when you're in Marvin. It is so much fun to hear about. But moving on to the next question, what are all of the different roles architects take on in the workspace, whether it's the nitty-gritty details or just kind of a broader role? And for this one, we will start off with Elaine.
This is one of the best things I think about being an architect is you can take on whatever role you want to. And I think one of my realizations as I started to work with better and better architects was realizing how big a role I had to play in my community. Whereas in the smaller firms, that was very much, my role was a project-based role. And when I got more and more involved, I realized it was a community-based role. And that when I worked on a project, you have a lot more leverage, you have a lot more influence over things outside of your project boundaries than you realize. And that even as part of a design team, a development team, you can say, you know what, we want to do this. And because we want to do this, we're asking you to do this in return. And you'd be surprised at how often those conversations turn into something really wonderful. And if you constantly think inside of the boundaries of what you're working on, you're going to miss that aspect, that role that an architect needs to take in the community. And you go from designing stair details, you can keep your head there if that's what makes you happy, but understand that you have the ability as an architect to build cities. That's what we do. And you can have a huge influence. I think that has been the most remarkable thing about my career, is realizing the influence that I've had in the places where I've lived. And don't think for a minute you don't.
Yeah, awesome. That is such a great answer. But we'll move on to Greg to follow it up.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Well, I think along the lines of the question you were talking about, I'm thinking in terms of practice itself. There's so many different things that go into actually running and having an architectural practice, and so many things that you can kind of do. I've been fortunate enough that I've always worked for firms that looked for well, almost always have been in firms that were really, you were asked to be a very broad-based person. You had to do everything. You had to develop a skill set to do just about everything. I mean, I love doing business development and doing interviews. I love the design phase. It's those absolute, couple of weeks of ecstasy followed by a couple of years of horror. And then, you love that process. I'm a detail-oriented person. I like design development. That's kind of in the office, the world I live in. How do you make things? How do you put things together? There's that whole phenomenon of the interrelationship that exists with working with a contractor during during construction, and the relationships you build, much like when you're working in design with the client. I've found I like to play across all those. In most firms I've been in, you've almost been expected to do that. And I think it makes well-rounded people. BNIM, we try to keep people that way. But if you're interested in focusing on one particular thing and one particular avenue, perhaps a project type, or perhaps just different aspects of the profession, it's okay. It's welcome. You're encouraged to do it if you want to really develop an expertise. But the one time I remember I did feel uncomfortable is I did one tour of duty with years ago. I'm one of those people that's worked for so many firms. It's insane. But I've gotten in 26 at BNIM now, so that's good. I've worked in all these different places, and in one example, I worked for one of the giant sports firms in Kansas City, and oh my God, it was not my world. You were put into a rabbit hole, a pigeonhole, and you did within the boundaries you were told to stay in. I remember once I was working on design. We were doing a study for redoing it's actually where Indiana college basketball team played, redoing their arena. And I was called on the carpet and disciplined because my role was a senior project architect. I was not a project designer, and I had to quit doing it. I was breaking going out of my bounds. Stop that. And there were spec writers, there were CA people, and they used to call it their union card. That was a miserable experience, being pigeonholed for me, unless I can't think of any one thing I want to do. So one of the things I've always liked about the profession was you could bounce around and you could do different kind of things. You could develop different kind of relationships, be they community, as was mentioned, or be it with clients, or be it with contractors or your peers. So I like that ability to be cross-platform, and I tend to seek that out. I think that's a positive thing.
Awesome. Great comments all around, but we will continue the conversation with Zach.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I guess I've learned is, you kind of got to be a chameleon. You got to be willing to take on different tasks. You got to be willing to learn. There's going to be days where you're going to be drawing stair details, and there's going to be days where you're doing the big picture ideas, and some things are more fun and enjoyable to you than others. But having that willingness to go in and take those things on, and on top of that, being willing to speak up, I think is incredibly valuable. Knowing that, I sometimes when we're in meetings, there's younger architects in there that just don't want to say anything, and I know they have good ideas. They went through the similar things that we did, and keeping those things to yourself, I don't think does the project any good or does your team members any good. So you never know what kind of what your idea is going to spark and the direction that it could head. And so having that willingness to speak up, and knowing that sometimes you're going to be wrong. So on the other side of that is knowing how to take criticism is the biggest thing. You can't take stuff personal. You really can't.
All right. And then
my interns, I want one word for every dollar that I can.
I'm stealing that one too.
I'm so tired of quiet interns.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, speak up. But we'll finish off this question with Josh. Do you have any comments you want to give us?
I definitely like to echo, a lot of things that have already been said. First couple of years, definitely be a sponge, seek out opportunities where you can help the team, and don't just, get done with your one task that you're working on and just kind of stay there, always be looking for that next opportunity. But then, after your first couple of years, don't be afraid to see, what role maybe you want to move to in a company, or maybe what role doesn't exist in the company, and what opportunity can you bring, to the company to flourish. Just because something doesn't exist where you're at doesn't mean that it can't exist. So just be flexible.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get to our questions from the audience since we're running out of time. We have just a couple, but the University of Kansas did just start their interior architecture program not too long ago. So what are the roles of interior designers and architects, and the I just got a notification, and the collaboration between them and the general architects? And we'll start off with Zach on this one.
At least for our company, I think that those lines are being blurred a little bit more and more. I think that those roles are becoming less and less frequent, or less and less particular. You have to, like I said a little bit ago, and we've been saying, is that you got to kind of be willing to take on other tasks. And that's why we said early on that, you know, you got to get broad experiences in order to do so. And you got to be willing to learn and to be a sponge, not to, you know, to keep using those same phrases, but it's 100% true. You don't want to get stuck into a role of, okay, well, I'm just an interior architect, so that's the only thing I'm going to do. I think you have to be willing to take on other tasks. And as an architect, you got to be willing to do the interior stuff, and you got to be willing to take on the construction administration and the spec writing. The more well-rounded you are as an individual, the better professional that you're going to be.
Yeah, awesome. We will jump over to Greg for the next input.
You were talking kind of how the interior design kind of fits in, and in the case, most of the places I've worked, I'll use BNIM as the example here. That is an integral part of the practice. It always has been since I started there. One of the former principals, David Emmonshew, sadly now deceased, he really pushed that and really made that a part of the firm. And we've played over the years with bringing in other disciplines. We've had landscape, we've had urban planning, we've played even with structural and some stuff like that. I don't think it ever actually happened, but those things all kind of come and go. What we've found is interior architecture and architecture are basically the same thing. There's just maybe a slight different emphasis. The interior people have to talk to furniture and carpet dealers. That's how I make the distinction. You know, they're indispensable, the two of them. When we build project teams, we try to make sure we have everybody from both disciplines on a project from the outset all the way through. It's not just the person that comes in and picks the colors at the end, as a client once thought an interior designer did. But you know, it's an indispensable part of the practice because it does have a certain expertise, especially with programming things up front and all the way through. So it's a very, as Zach was saying, a very blurred distinction. People come from different backgrounds, but it all sort of, you know, the interior designers don't do brick details, and I don't pick furniture. But other than that, the design process is seamlessly intertwined, really.
Awesome. With that being said, we'll jump over to Josh to discuss the role of the interior architect and designer.
I think it comes down a lot to the firm you're at and how it's structured. We used to share an office with an interior design company, so we did a lot of work with them. They were the interior architects on any project that required it. So they did a lot more than probably most interior designers would do, and we relied on them a lot for that. Now we just switched offices, so they're not under the same roof as us. So now we're kind of reaching out and doing more of that stuff ourselves. So I think it's really dependent on the firm you're at and how they work.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and finally, for the final comment on this question, Elaine, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask this, because I was just part of a conversation about how to better integrate our interiors practice with our primary practice. Part of it is how our LS3P has grown, in that we kind of swallowed an interiors firm and we swallow an architecture firm, and those teams tend to stay together. And then, you know, somebody said last week, yeah, but you architects never have to deal with, oh, my cousin's really good at architecture, so we're just going to pull him in to design the building. That's what happens all the time. For our interiors team, we will design, you know, an awful lot of effort goes into designing a thoughtful building, and then the client will pull in an untrained person to do all the interiors. And, you know, basically these very, very skilled people are replaced because of perception that what they do isn't as difficult. And we made a conscious decision at the end of last week to include interiors in every single project. It's no longer an add-on or an option in our contracts. It's going to be part of every project, because if we're going to put our name on these projects, we really do need control over every aspect of the building as much as possible. So, if you're going to take ownership, take ownership. And it was an interesting discussion. I never even thought of it that way. I would hate to be really good at what I do and be told that, oh, my best friend, she's really good with interiors. She's going to do the interiors for our new office. Come on, it's just not going to be the same. So we've decided to really put our foot down and say we're a professional services firm. And that goes all the way through the building.
Yeah, awesome. Here, the times are changing, and we're getting a little bit more representation. So our final question for today, since it looks like we were running close on time, is when you're starting to look at internships and offers from out of states, how much should we be expecting, or should we be concerned about having to pay for our own housing? And is it common for firms to kind of assist with the funding of moving to a completely new location? And we're going to go ahead and start with Zach, just because I know he does have to leave kind of soon. So yeah.
Yeah, I can obviously speak for our company. I think that, and as well as friends that I have in the industry and what they've experienced, for the most part, if the company isn't willing to pay to move you, then I question how valuable that would be for you to actually move. There needs to be compensation for cost of living. Cities are more expensive, even with work from home and all that, and COVID and virtual and all that stuff. I think that it shows value in who you are, and the fact that you're willing to go across the country to take on a different role or a different job and uproot your life. So be your own biggest advocate. No one's going to take care of you but you. And you have to be willing to ask for what you think is fair. And there's all sorts of resources out there on what is reasonable. But I would say for the most part, if you're going to move across the country, then there will be some sort of compensation in order to do so.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I don't know if I'll get a chance to say thank you to Zach, so I'm going to say thank you now. I do hope you have a good meeting after this. But we are going to jump over to Elaine to talk next about this.
I don't get involved in any compensation or new employee negotiations, but I can tell you based on my own experience and in talking to friends who have owned firms, if you don't ask for it, you probably won't get it. Don't assume that they're going to say, and here's your moving package, because if you don't ask, they don't need to pay it, right? And that goes for raises. I have a good friend who had a very successful firm for about 20 years. She said she was so angry because good designers would just go year after year after year without asking for a raise. She says, and the bad ones, she says, so often a bad one would ask for a raise, but they were valuable enough that we'd give them a raise. And you'd get this, she said, yeah, if somebody wants a moving package or a signing bonus or whatever you want to call it, ask for it. The worst, my dad always says, the worst I can say is no.
There you go. Yeah, great. That is so true, even outside of this context. Putting yourself out there and requesting representation. We will then jump over to Greg to this question.
And I need to sign off. I need to go teach a class, but it's been very fun talking with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good to meet you, Elaine.
Thank you. Thanks, Elaine.
Well, I know that speaking for BNIM's perspective, if we make what we sometimes call a strategic hire, where we actually go out and look for someone to fill a particular role or help with like developing a market sector or do something like that, usually there is compensation because you're probably uprooting somebody. So there usually is something to do with moving, something to do with housing. Those things exist. Day to day, just hiring people, people out of school or whatever. No, there's nothing. There's encouragement. There's, if you're coming in from another city, there might be advice and counsel on places to look and things to do and stuff like that. But there isn't any kind of a like financial assistance package or something unless it's a very targeted situation.
Awesome. All right, we will jump over to Josh to finish us off.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily a standard in the field. I think it's definitely one of those situations where you kind of need to read the room. Depending on the size of firm you're going to, larger firms are a little bit more willing to do things like that. But also what the market is, at the time when you're looking for a new job. If you know everyone's hiring, something like that might be something that you can negotiate. But if it's, like when I graduated in 2009 in the height of a depression, hey, just be thankful that you have a job interview. Maybe don't push your luck, because the last thing you do want to do if you really like the firm is come in on grounds where, they might be a little bit bitter by you kind of asking for something that they're not expecting to give. But I do echo the sentiments of everyone else. You never get what you don't ask for. But when you ask for something that isn't offered, be willing to accept, no, and also understand that might carry other implications too.
Awesome. So we've just hit time, but I do want to say a huge thanks to all of our speakers for coming and giving us this insight. I can speak at least for myself that some of these I didn't actually know about the industry, and are definitely things I'm going to have to start focusing on. But if you, as far as anyone else who was here, if you enjoyed it and you want to share it to a friend, this will be up on our YouTube channel soon. And so you can kind of give that feedback to everyone else. But you all are free to go. Thank you again so much to our speakers.
Yeah, I apologize again for being late. If anybody wants to reach out separately with a question, I'll be glad to try it. So.
Yeah, no worries. And I have all of the speakers' emails. So if you do want to reach out to any of them,
that'd be fine. That'd be welcome. Thank you.
I can definitely get you in touch with them. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks everybody.
Take care. Good to see you all.